guys, I'm Heather and welcome to my February wrap-up. I've read 15 books this month, which I feel like is a pretty good job. One of my goals this year is to read down my physical TBR, and 14 out of the 15 books that I read this month are on my physical TBR. We're not going to think about the upcoming haul. We're going to focus on our victories, not our backsliding, and discuss the books that I have read this month. So I am doing the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge, and 13 out of the 15 books that I read are part of that challenge for me, though one of them could be if I wanted to. I just have other books for those that I had planned to read. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first book that I have is by Nora Roberts. It's Blood Brothers, and it's the book 1 in the Sign of Seven trilogy. I do have book 2 and 3, and I enjoyed this. So the thing about the star rating is that the 3-star is such a broad range. So I think the way that I'm probably going to do it, because obviously 1 star, I hate it, want it to die in a fire. 2, I don't like it. 3 is such a broad, it's whatever, or yeah, I kind of like that. So I think I'm going to break that up into 3 and 3.5. And I would say this was like a 3.5. I liked it. I'm interested in continuing. It's a story that continues through all 3 books. And I really do feel like I want to continue. I want to find out what happens. So this book is basically about a town called Hawkins Hollow back in the colonial days, or the Puritan days. I guess it was Puritan. It was before, I think, colonial even. There was this evil and the guy that tried to stop it. They both kind of not died necessarily, I guess, but kind of went underground. And then this book, I guess, takes place in the 90s probably. Or 2000s, somewhere in the 2000s, because they mentioned time frame, so I don't really know. It's it starts out in 1652, so that's like the Puritan era, and then 87 is the first time. So then something happens every 7 years. So in 1987, 3 boys who were all born on the same day at the same time go to what's called the Pagan Stone. They have a blood brother pact, and that awakens the powers of the good guy, but also kind of the evil guy, where he's kind of trapped, but every 7 years he comes out and wreaks havoc. So we are now in some time period that's in the 2000s. Basically, where does it say? Oh, here it is. 2008. So now it's 2008, and this is the year that it is all going to come to a head. They either defeat the evil, or it's going to come and, destroy the town. So it's interesting. I've never read Nora Roberts before. I've only read, the J.D. Robb books, and it felt different. So I like this, but I felt a little stiff to me, less easy than some other books. But I do want to finish the trilogy, so, I do at least like it enough to finish it. So I would say this is 3.5 stars. And for the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge, I had this as a author with more than 20 books. Then the next book I have is The Bad Seed by William March, and look at this thing. It's disgustingly falling apart. It's not like the first printing of the book. That was in 1954, but this particular one was 1961. It is disgusting. It smells disgusting. It's falling apart. I actually had to get the ebook of this because I could not read this for very long. Otherwise, my allergies were going crazy. So I'm getting rid of that book regardless, but I picked this book for the Goodreads 4+ star review prompt in the Pop Sugar Challenge because I wanted to decide if I wanted to buy another copy. At this point, I am not sure. I would actually probably give this 3.5 stars, so actually below the average. So this book is about a woman with a daughter that she just does not understand. This girl is basically a sociopath. It tells you right on the back that she murders somebody. So that's not much of a spoiler if you know anything about this story at all. It's not really a spoiler. So she murders somebody, and it's the mother really coming to terms with this. And the idea of the bad seed is it something that's genetic? And it has the points of view of the daughter, Rhoda, and then also the mother, and then like a handful of other characters that interact with Rhoda on a regular basis. And you learn a lot more about how they think and how they feel than you did in the movie. But I actually find that I like the movie a little bit more than I like the book. Like the movie I actually love. I loved the remake, like the made-for-TV one in the 80s. And I actually like it better because there's stuff in the book that just, to fill out a book, maybe you need that much detail about stuff that's inconsequential, really. But there was some of that, and that kind of like, I'm like, do I really have to read about her going to the library to research? Because you could tell us she did that, and we don't have to see her doing it necessarily because it was kind of boring. But what I did like about the book was that you do get a little bit more motivation, I guess, from Rhoda. Like you figure out what she's thinking, what she's feeling, and that's actually kind of interesting. But overall, I would give that 3.5. I definitely like the movie better than I like the book. And then I have Heist Society by Allie Carter for the Goodreads Challenge. This is a pun in the title, and I actually enjoy this. I liked the premise. It was easy to read. It wrapped up, so I don't have to read any of the other ones if I don't want to, but I actually kind of do. There is a thread and a mystery thief that's not finished in this book, so I do want to figure all that out. In this book, a teen thief is trying to get out of the business, gets drugged back in when her father is accused of stealing basically a gangster's portraits and paintings and stuff like that. And she has to get a gang of teen thieves together in order to try to steal them back. And it's pretty interesting. It's exciting. I like where it went. You know, some things I figured out pretty early. But I like that it wasn't a huge focus on romance, that there was some of that in there because it's a teen book. But yeah, I would like to read more of this series, and I'm going to give it 4 stars. So the next book I have is by Melissa De La Cruz. It's Summer on East End, Triple Moon. And this is about a pair of twin witches who get kind of wrapped up in a murder and are sent to East End with family friends, and stuff happens. There's trouble, things go wrong, the girls fight all the time. So it's part of, but not exactly part of, the Witches of East End. This is kind of like a spin-off, so some of the characters I think from that series are in this, but not central, so you don't have to read those. I've never read those. I did read a few of the Blue Bloods books, and it's all in the same world because there's actually a mention to the vampires. But yeah, I mean, this was decent. I enjoyed it. I got through it quickly. I didn't love it. And when I realized that the second book did not continue a story, but was like another adventure, I guess, like the next year, I didn't really feel compelled to read it. I do have it, so I will get to it at some point, but I didn't need to read it right away, and I would give this a 3.5 stars. It was not part of my reading challenge. I just wanted something easy. Then the next book that I have is The Girl Who Could Move Shit With Her Mind by Jackson Ford. And this book is about maybe like 20-something-year-old girl who has psychokinetic abilities, and in order to not be a guinea pig for the government, she works as like some special ops agent. But then there is a body that shows up that could only have been killed by someone with psychokinesis, and she is suspected, and she has like a day to figure out what's happening. I couldn't find out much about the author, Jackson Ford. It seems that it is an alias for a sci-fi writer, but I couldn't find out who. I don't read sci-fi, so it probably wouldn't have made much of a difference anyway. It's clearly a British writer. It takes place in Los Angeles, but there are spellings for things that are not American spellings, like curb and tire and pajamas, that are not spelled the way they would be spelled in the US. So it's not an American. I would imagine it's a British author. And I would give this maybe like 3 stars. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It was just kind of meh for me. It's told mostly from the point of view of Tegan in the first person. However, it goes to chapters for Jake, who is the other psychokinetic person out there, and his are all in the third person. So I don't love that. And it was kind of boring at times. It was an interesting idea, but the book itself was kind of boring to me. So it was okay. It looks like, I don't know if it's out yet, but there's a sequel. It sets it up in the end. I may or may not try to read it. I don't have it. I don't think it's out yet. It might be coming out or just out. I don't know. But I'm not in a hurry to read it, but if I come across it, I might. And that book was an eye-catching title, I think was the prompt for the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge. Then the next book is Prom Nights from Hell. This is by Meg Cabot, Kim Harrison, Michelle Jaffe, Stephanie Meyer, and Lauren Miracle. And these are all basically like supernatural prom stories. What I did not enjoy about this was that, except for like one story, and I think it was the one by Lauren Miracle called The Corsage, they all felt like they should have been longer. Like they were just like the intro to a series kind of thing. I mean, I would have liked just like individual stories that were that story and then done. So I know for a fact that the Kim Harrison story is the lead-in to the series that she did with Madison Avery. And I don't know how long that series ended up being, but it was like her young adult series, and it was an okay intro to it. I don't know. I don't think I'd want to necessarily go back and read the book. It wasn't that great. I do actually remember having that book at some point, but I can't remember if I read it. The story that I liked the most in here was called Kiss and Tell by Michelle Jaffe, Jaffe. I don't know how to say that. And she wrote Bad Kitty. And her story was my favorite one. But again, it felt like it wasn't over. Like, so I don't know if she wrote or intended to write more on these characters. Because, yeah, it didn't wrap anything up. It left so much open that it felt like it should have been like a lead into a series. There was one by Stephanie Meyer, and, you know, it felt like, yeah, I guess it could have been done, but it also could have been extended. Corsage was the only one, and that was by Lauren Miracle, that was like its own story. And it was based on the monkey paw, and I just didn't like it that much. That was probably my least favorite. I'll be honest, I don't really remember the one from Meg Cabot. It's called The Exterminator's Daughter. I do remember it being another one that just like totally was not over. So where'd the rest of the story go? It felt like it was supposed to be like the 0.5 in a series of a book to like lead into another series. Like, and that was my big problem with this. I mean, overall, I would probably give it a 3. And this one I picked for the anthology prompt. It was okay, but I mean, like, I don't want to get a book like this that's only supposed to make me buy other books. Alright, the next book I have is Doll Bones by Holly Black. And this book is about a 12-year-old named Zach who has been playing with dolls with his neighbors up until this point, but his dad thinks he needs to be a man and throws them all out. So he, instead of telling his friends what happened, rejects the stories that they're doing until they come to him one night and tell him that they need to go on a quest to bury the doll that has been like the queen of their stories in her rightful grave. It was okay. It's a middle grade. I would give it a 3. It's not for me, but it's middle grade. And I read this book for the name with flora and fauna prompt, like an author with flora fauna in the name. Then the next book I have is My Almost Flawless Tokyo Dream Life, and this is by Rachel Cohn. I did not like this. I thought it was boring and nothing happened. So I think for this one I would give it 2 stars. I just did not like it. I was so annoyed. So in this story, our main character, whose name is Elle Zoellner, I don't know, it's a terrible name. That's her name. She moves to Japan to live with the father that she has never known. Her mother had been arrested for drugs, and she's been in foster care until her father tracks her down to have her come live with him. The timing being that his father is now dead, so it's okay. And it's just her trying to live in Tokyo and adjusting, and the fact that her family on that side didn't really want her anyway. And then the issues with her father, and then the issues with the popular kids at school, not liking the guy she likes, and it's just a whole lot of nothing. Like, a whole lot of nothing going on. The thing is, the plot on the surface is like pretty much the same as her other book, Gingerbread, that she wrote like ages ago. But that book was so much better than this one. This one's just not good at all. So I'm giving this a 2 star. I did pick this one for the book set in Japan prompt. However, I'm going to keep it because look at that lucky cat on the cover. I collect lucky cats. And there you go. That is so cute. So yeah, not a good book, but I love the cover, so I'm keeping it. So the next book I have is Hey Nostradamus by Douglas Copeland. And this book is kind of a complicated book for me. So in this book, it covers basically like 4 characters in 4 different years. The first character is in 1988. It's Cheryl, and she's a 17-year-old girl in high school who was secretly married to her boyfriend and had just found out she was pregnant, and she is murdered in a school shooting. And the first part is her narrating the events up to her death and then her death. And then it jumps forward 10 years to 1999, or 11 years, I guess, to the perspective of her husband and his coping, his loss of faith, because he had been, like her, super Christian, and, you know, his loss of faith, his struggle, and everything like that. Then it jumps forward a couple years to Heather, the girl that he has finally let into his life, and then how she is coping with him. And then finally it is like the next year later, and it's his father, Reg, who's finally realizing why all his family has left him and he's all alone. So it's like that. So it says back here that it's an unforgettable portrait of people wrestling with spirituality and with sorrow and its acceptance. So that's what this book is about. And I hated everybody in this book. Like, I hated everyone. But I like the story a little bit. And I've had this happen to me before. There's a book called A Long Way Down by Nick Hornby. And I really liked the book overall, but I hated the characters in them. But for some reason, the unlikable characters worked. In this, I don't think it worked as well. I did still like the story overall, but I did not like any of the characters. So in the end, I think I'm going to give this one a 3-star. And this was not for any prompt. Could have fit 2 of them, but I have other books for that. Then the next book I have is Diary of a Haunting by M. Verano. And I was super disappointed in this book. I really wanted to like it. I did pick this for a reading challenge prompt. There was a prompt that's like pick a past reading prompt. And there was one in 2019 for a ghost story. So I picked this one. In the end, I think I stretched it a little bit because while it's called a haunting, it didn't really feel like anything. In this book, Paige moves from Los Angeles to Idaho with her mother and brother when her parents get divorced. And things start happening. There's like a ton of flies, a ton of spiders. Her brother starts acting weird. All this kind of stuff. Until like some like bang of a conclusion. But nothing happened to lead up to that. Like, there was no escalation. They think they have it figured out, and then boom, and I'm like, how did we get here? The more I think about it, actually, the more really freaking irritated I am with this book. So I think in the end, I'm going to give it a 2. Unfortunately, I bought the other 2, but they don't follow the same people, so maybe they're better. I hope so, because I bought the other 2 before I actually finished this. I was so disappointed, like, literally 0 happens, and it's just really frustrating. But in a similar vein, I have The Merciless from Daniel Vega, and it's a somewhat similar thing. In this one, Sophia moves to, I guess, a town in Mississippi, and hooks up with the popular girls. They're like welcoming her, but they're like a little bit creepy Christian, but even so, they accept her. You know, she's not religious, but her grandmother was. And they decide that a former friend of theirs is possessed and needs to be exorcised. So they kidnap that girl, they hold her hostage, and that's what this is. It's like the exorcism of this girl. And, you know, obviously Sophia's like, what? Because this isn't right. You're just getting revenge. And so it's about what goes on, her feelings about it, and it does kind of end in really dramatic fashion that I was not really expecting. So I actually really enjoyed this, and I would say I would give it a 4. I'm glad I enjoyed it because I read a book by hers, a newer one called Haunted, and I hated it. So I'm actually really glad I liked this, and I would give it a 4 because unlike the other one, I bought all of those too, and luckily I like it. And that one was the Pop Sugar Challenge prompt for pink cover. Next we have my favorite book of this time, and that is Warcross by Marie Lu, and I'm going to give this 5 stars. We're in a world where everyone is kind of hooked in through their mind to the internet, essentially. It's like a huge network, and there's a really popular game called Warcross. Our main character, Emika, somehow glitches herself into a championship game, and because of that, she is hired by the creator of the game to find out what is happening. Someone is trying to destroy the game, and she's hired as a bounty hunter to stop it. Even though there is some romance in there, it's really action-packed the whole way. It's really exciting, and while I did figure stuff out as soon as it was possible to figure it out, there were some twists that I didn't necessarily see. So I picked this book. It's a stretch a bit for the prompt for like social media, because they do use it to communicate, social media. I finished this and I immediately ordered the sequel, which I've heard is not as good, but because this doesn't end, you actually have to read the sequel to see how the story is going to end. So I will read that as soon as I get it because I love this, and this is 5 stars. Now I have 3 more books to talk about. The first 2 that I have are these. When Diplomat, Rishi, and There's Something About Sweetie by Sandhya Menon, I guess, is the author. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. So these books are from the point of view of both the male and the female main characters, and these are all Indian teens. In the first book, when Dimple met Rishi, Dimple is not in line with what her parents want for her, which is to basically, go to college to meet a guy, but really to meet the guy that they want her to have, as arranged marriage is still an accepted practice. And she doesn't want that. She's a coder. She wants to pursue her career, all that. And she was accepted to Stanford and accepted to a summer program for coding. She gets her parents to agree to let her go, which she thinks is kind of weird, but, she's not going to miss the opportunity, so she goes with it. And then from the point of view of Rishi, he is the dutiful son. Whether or not he wants to do what they want him to do, he's doing it because that's what he's supposed to do. He's really an artist at heart, but is going into engineering because that's what because that's what is expected of him. And he goes to this programming camp that Dimple got accepted to meet his future wife, because he thinks that she's agreed to it, which she hasn't. And so right off the bat, they're at odds and on the wrong foot, but it's a contemporary romance, so you know where it goes. I would say maybe a 3 star on that one. I picked that for women in STEM just for the coding, but the problem is out of all the parts of the book, that was the least that was in there. And why was there a talent show at this thing? You're there for like 6 weeks or something. Why is there a talent show where you're not spending your time coding, but you're learning to dance or juggle or whatever? I mean, that makes no sense. So I would give that book 3-star. I would actually give There's Something About Sweetie 3.5 stars. I like this significantly better. Oddly, still another talent show. Don't get it. But it fit a little bit more into the plot without feeling like it was like shoved in there. The one thing that I didn't like about this, and this follows Sweetie and Ashish, who's the brother of Rishi from the first book. And similarly, Ashish has had his heart broken, and he gives his parents a challenge like, fine, you think you could do better? Set me up with someone. And they pick Sweetie. But Sweetie's mother doesn't want her to be set up with him because she feels like Sweetie isn't good enough. So Sweetie is plus size, and she feels that her mother doesn't accept her, that everyone makes fun of her. And the thing is it was all the time about how fat she was, how she didn't care that people thought she was fat, but everyone was always talking about how fat she was, and she was always talking about how fat she was. And I'm like, stop it. People don't care that much. You know, not every person you cross paths with on the street is going to mock you for being fat. Just stop. I mean, that's how it felt in this book. It was such a huge issue. So while, you know, she was trying to be body positive, it's just like it was constantly harping on it and got really annoying. But overall, this book was better than the first one, and I would give it 3.5. I don't know that I would read another one. There is another one coming out, possibly in the future. I don't know. And this book was for the Woman of Color author prompt. And so the last book I did not actually own, and that one was Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. I picked that one for the trans or binary author prompt, and I enjoyed it. I kind of wish it ended differently. There are a lot of these types of books that I somehow end up reading with that type of main character. The Spellman Files is kind of like that. The one that I mentioned earlier, The Girl Who Can Move Shit With Her Mind, is a similar character. They drink all the time. They come off as like irresponsible and all that kind of stuff. A lot of them tend to be PIs or something like that. But this one had the magic element. It was interesting. I would maybe give this 3.5. I didn't love it. Like, I didn't like how it ended up. I think I would have liked more magic, you know, more stuff than what ultimately happened. It almost felt like she kind of stumbled on things. My battery died, but I forgot where I was. But yeah, Magic for Liars, liked it okay. I didn't love it. I wanted to, because it sounded really interesting. And that was the last book that I read for the month. That's my wrap up, and I will see you guys next time. I've got a haul coming up. I have a TBR coming up. So, yeah. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.